Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We're really excited to see you here today. I'm Melissa Ngan, President and CEO of the American Composers Orchestra. I am joined by two wonderful, wonderful creatures, Mary Kouyoumdjian from New Music Gathering and also Lainie Fefferman from New Music Gathering. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to these two wonderful human beings and also to welcome you to today's professional development session. This is part of a series that we're presenting in connection with our Earshot Composer Advancement programs. So we're welcoming a lot of our Earshot composers into the webinar today. And if any have questions, we're happy to see them on screen a little bit later on. And we're also presenting these in partnership with the American Composers Forum, which is a wonderful partner that we have in all of our Earshot work. This session is on creating meaningful creative relationships. And I am joined today by two of the finest at that. Mary is a composer with projects ranging from concert works to multimedia collaborations and film scores. She is a first-generation Armenian American, and having come from a family directly affected by the Lebanese Civil War and Armenian genocide, she uses a sonic palette that draws on her heritage, interest in music as documentary, and background in experimental composition to progressively blend the old with the new. That is beautiful. And Lainie is the founder and co-director of Exapno, a new music community center in downtown Brooklyn, and has been commissioned by So Percussion, Make Music New York, Ethel, Jack Quartet, and many more that I don't have time to name today. So congratulations to you, Lainie, for some wonderful work. And together, the two of them are the driving force behind New Music Gathering. So we're going to hear a little bit more about what that program is and how it has been advancing relationships between composers, artists, and the entire new music community for many years. So we're really excited for today's conversation. A couple of little tech reminders for you. We have a Q&A button below the video screen where you can submit your comments to us, to the panelists, and we'll have time to answer those throughout, but particularly in the second half of the webinar. You're also welcome to use the chat function to interact with one another anytime. And this panel will also be recorded and available on ACO's YouTube and ACF's website as a result. I'd like to thank a few folks who have really made this series possible. First of all, our partners at American Composers Forum, and also the Virginia B. Toulmin Foundation, the New York State Council on the Arts, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and our individual donors. And of course, our whole ACO staff, Lindsay Working, Aidan Feldkamp, Stephen Baer, Derek Vermel, and Sydney Cusick. So welcome, welcome, welcome. We're very excited to have you all here today. And we wanted to start by kind of asking a question of you as you're kind of coming into this space. We're here to talk about developing relationships. And as we all know, that's one of the most important things you will ever do in your career. So we wanted to start by unpacking that word a little bit. I'm curious if you would be able to share, those of you who are watching in the chat, if you're watching on Facebook or in the Zoom webinar right now, what that word networking means to you, and also perhaps what comes up for you when you start thinking about that word, because it's a word that evokes a lot of things for us in terms of emotional things we hope to get out of the experience. We might feel weird about it. So I wonder, like Lainie and Mary, what does that word mean to you?
It's terrible. It means terrible feelings for me. It's something there are words that the content of which are things I love, but the label itself has been so tarnished in my mind. And one of them is networking. And I love everything that networking literally means in a dictionary. Connecting with new people, sharing ideas, creating bonds over common interests and experiences, like all of that is fantastic. But the word networking feels like a cheesy early 90s corporate video and really nasty, self-promoting-y, uninterested in community vibes. So maybe we can all try and reclaim that word, networking, for the stuff that we want it to mean and that it can mean, and get rid of the weird, negative, impersonal association.
Yeah, totally. And I'm seeing Chris agreeing with you. I see the word sleazy in there. You know, the idea that networking itself makes you feel sleazy. And this is actually really important. Like, you're only making friendships to take advantage of them, which I think is where that negative piece of the word comes to be. But on the pro side, it's about building connections and community. Mary, I'm curious what that means to you.
Yeah, I mean, I even just like started sweating a little bit, just to be a little honest, like, because I haven't really thought of it as networking in a really long time. I think that when I remember when I was in grad school, I was studying composition, but I was studying composition for film, which has an entirely different social network, I think, than a lot of the music that, at least that I'm currently interested in making. And it can be a lot more business-like, like old world business-like, where you do network. And I remember being told by my teachers, okay, anytime you're in a social situation, whether it's a festival or you're seeing a movie or whatever, and you meet a professional contact, be really charming, win them over with your charm, say your full name, make sure they hear it at least twice, give them your pitch of the kind of work that you do, ask them lots of questions, because people who are asked lots of questions think that you're interesting, even if they learn nothing about you, and make sure that you walk out with a business card. And that idea of that transaction makes, like, my heart rate is already racing thinking about those instances where I've had to walk in a room and do that. And it makes me feel really gross, and it makes me feel like I'm not meeting people for the genuine interest of meeting others. And yes, there will be professional contacts and collaborations might come from networking, which actually I'm just going to switch that word to socializing, because that feels better to me than networking does. But what it means to me now is, how do you just meet people in a genuine and honest kind of way? And when you meet someone for the first time, is that planting a seed to continue a longer lasting relationship? I think that feels like a healthier way to look at it than what scares us initially.
I hear that totally. And John Paul just added to the chat that networking brings up feelings of jumping on one of those moving walkways at the airport that's going really fast. There's something so there's something about the process that feels fast. And also another word that came up a lot was transactional, or like you're trying to get something from someone. Those are the kind of negative sides of that word. The positive side, I think, is the word that Mary just used. It's about relationship building. Right. So I love the idea of shifting that to being something that is more social, something that is more about building the relationship. You know, someone very wise once said to me that if you're really looking to build a network of support around your work, what you're doing is you're creating relationships way before you need them. And constantly stoking that relationship so that at whatever point the time is right for you to partner on something, they're there for you. But everyone can smell that from a mile away, right? If you're only after it for the short term. So I think that's all of the stuff that we're all articulating feels a little gross about the process, right? So in one of our prep calls, I know we talked about the speed aspect, or perhaps the distance aspect, whether it feels more like a sprint than a marathon. I'm curious if you might be able to expand on that just a little bit.
Someone just rang my doorbell. I'm sorry, Mary, you wanted to take.
Okay,
a new networking person.
Such a cute doorbell too. Right, that it should feel like a marathon. I think that something that we had talked about together was that when you're meeting someone, the idea isn't that you're going to, don't try to get everything you want to get in that first meeting, or to even think of that meeting as a way to get something, to think of it as long-term relationship building, just as we do with friends. Like, you don't just meet someone and instantly become best friends with them. You have to cultivate that friendship and that relationship. So it's felt healthier to think of relationship building as a marathon, in which hopefully when you meet someone, you have several occurrences where you're continuing to talk with them, where you see them, you get like multiple coffees and such, and actually set up a foundation so that you can develop trust with each other. And as we know, as music makers, it's really difficult to create music with each other if there isn't trust with collaborators and people that we meet, because music is very vulnerable. At least the act of making it and performing it is very vulnerable. So yeah, long-term thinking.
Also, more of the long term.
This might be idealistic, but I love the idea that if you're wanting to talk to someone only about what they can do for you, and you're not interested in their work, you probably shouldn't work with that person. You know what I mean? Like, you should be even if you're never going to work together, it should be someone you're interested in talking to. Like, if a little fairy could come, with her golden wings and say, you will never ever get anything professionally valuable to your own career from this person, I'm hoping it's still a person you'd be interested to get to know and learn from. So if that base is true, then I think a lot of things would probably take care of themselves if you remind yourself of why you're interested to talk to that person and focus on that for a long time before. Because it's true, like the little nasty Lainie is like, oh, I love your playing and I just want you to play my music. But just remembering, oh no, this player, this collaborator, this artist, like, I love what you do and I want to learn more about what you do. That's gonna be so valuable to me as a human, as an artist, but regardless of whether we end up working together or not. That's helped me a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, what I would say here is that it sounds like we want to slow ourselves down a little bit in terms of the distance between meeting and when we actually want to get a partnership or anything work related to happen. So as we work through our conversation today, that's sort of a frame we want to put on everything. And Lainie, I think you said something really special about the number of times you want to actually have contact with someone before making an actual ask.
Yeah. And it's funny, we had our fun conversation earlier and I was thinking, oh, where did I get that from? That's not me. But my friend Camilla Arcu, a wonderful pianist and a brilliant, just dancer through life, gave me the tip, if there's someone you want to work with, or if there's someone you want to have a connection with, a professional connection with, really think about maintaining 5 solid points of contact before you even broach anything professional.
Mm-hmm.
So today, your own profession.
Exactly. So today we're going to have multiple ways that you can do that. And I also want you to think, if you're watching this, about the idea that there are some contacts that you will meet because you intend to, and then there will be some contacts that you meet just because. And I was just talking to one of our team members who had a meaningful conversation about Philip Glass at the doctor's office. Like, you just never know when this sort of thing is going to happen. But one thing to think about is what you need to have prepared in advance of that, right? So on the one hand, you want to think about, if you're going to meet somebody intentionally, what are the things that you want to know about them and be prepared to talk about if that comes up. But it's also helpful to note that even if you don't know that you're about to meet someone who's going to be helpful to you, one of the biggest things you can do is make sure that if you do have that chance meeting and that person has the opportunity to look you up, that all of your ducks are in a row, like your online presence, all of those things are in place, so that when they Google your name, when they go to see what your projects look like, that's all ready. That's not something that you have to search out afterwards. So there's a fair amount of pre-work, but I want to talk about where some of these relationship building things can happen in general. So earlier we were talking about one of my early internships, like the pre-dating all of this, is that some networking happens, usually not successfully, through the mail. And my very first job as an intern was to throw out all of the composer submissions that came to an orchestra that I worked with. So if that breaks your heart, if you're watching, know that that is a possibility. So we're going to go from like light touch things, right, with low chance of success, to things that have a little bit more chance of a relationship building. Then, of course, we are now in a place where we are connecting online more and more and more. So what are some of the ways we could do that? So Lainie and Mary, I'm curious if either of you have an email campaign or newsletter that you send out at this point.
No, I swear I've gotten one from you, Lainie. No, stop.
So I used to do it, but then I'm going to name names. You know who stopped me doing it was Ted Hearn, because Ted Hearn's such a lovely guy and I love his music so much. And he sent out a bunch of like big email campaigns, and I was realizing, oh, I'm missing these fabulous concerts that Ted did. And then he switched at some point to sending very short personal emails. It was like, hey, Lainie, I'm going to be in New York again. I got a thing at BAM. Are you around? You want to get a beer? And that made me actually remember and go to his things. And I thought, oh, maybe that's what I should do and not have a big aggregate email newsletter. Because in my mind, for me, this is just me, I have few enough events that I feel really comfortable pushing them on social media. And I have a very blended life between extremely non-professional and professional usage of my social media. So that's in my mind what what the sort of constant rumble of here's me and here's my career, that's for.
Right.
I have a website for, as you say, if someone meets me and is curious. I have a presence through my website and through various, streaming music and video platforms. And then email, for me, I take it to be I am reaching out to you, Melissa, to you, Mary, because I really want your smart ears and heart at this concert because it's really important to me. And just as someone receiving that email, I melt for that. I'm like, oh, Ted wants me, Shelley wants me. Oh my gosh, these people care that I'm kind of, and even if I know that there's just a giant list and they're copy pasting and putting names and stuff, I'm still on that list and I feel like a connection that a person has me as an ear and a heart that they care to have at that event. So that is what I have started to shift to. But yeah,
so
Mary,
personal
but you
emails.
don't personally. So I do emails, but it's not an email campaign. It's real short and it's for a single or maybe two events. Like, I'm so excited. I got these 1 or 2 things coming up, but it's individual. It's not like a MailChimp or a thing or whatever. I might really try and craft the nicest, punchiest one-liner and then send individual emails to individual people.
Makes sense. Mary, what's your experience been like?
Mixed. So I currently, I think to a fault, don't send newsletters. The past few years have sent like one a year, whereas I was sending one every like couple months. But I think, Lainie, I hear what you're saying about sending the smaller, more targeted emails, especially if it's like, I have a show in your town and I want to see you. But I find that often a lot of the things that like I'm announcing aren't necessarily like a show that someone can go to, but are projects that I've been working on. And I want folks to know that like maybe I've been kind of hiding out for a while, but it's that like the struggle with the illusion of like being busy, but I do want people to know that I'm still being productive. So I'll send like a big newsletter once a year that says, this is all the stuff I've been caring about and working on. And while I see the statistics on MailChimp of who opens things and who doesn't, and who clicks on links and who doesn't. And for the most part, it's a lot of like empty, just, okay, nothing happened with that. But sometimes people do click and people do watch. And a lot of the times I get a handful of meaningful emails back from people who I haven't really been in touch with in a long time, who say, hey, it's so cool to see that you're like still doing this, or that you're doing this and whatever and whatever. And then I end up having a reason to actually have a meaningful engagement with that person and see how they're doing, and talk about like not necessarily project-based things, but more just like, how are you? Life. How's your family? Life, like person who has been in my life in some capacity. So that I've really appreciated, but the labor of doing like a monthly newsletter, I don't think has, for me anyway, the payoff that is worth the effort of that.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Yasha Narveson, another organizer, I know he sends out, every couple of months, maybe an email newsletter. And I've noticed the feedback that because same as Mary, I think most people probably in the field, like in whatever you want to call our quirky music making field, maybe the newsletter kind of goes over them. But folks in his life, family members, friends who aren't in music, who he hasn't seen in a long time, will write him back and will be really engaged and excited about his performances. So I wonder if maybe folks who are signed up for, I'm terrible because I get all excited, like, oh, sign me up for your news, I sign up for every newsletter and then I get overwhelmed by the giant list of newsletters and I don't open them. But for folks for whom maybe you are one of their 6 or 7 artists that they know personally and they get a newsletter from you, I wonder if that's way more meaningful. And even I'm being a little inconsiderate when I go, I've put that onto my social media, because a lot of those folks, I think in my life, older people who maybe aren't as active on social media, or family members who don't engage with their art life and their family life in the same way. Like for those folks, I wonder if an email campaign really is more valuable.
Right. So what we're starting to get at here is that everything we talk about today should be not just an opportunity for you to connect with people, but an opportunity for you to gather data about how they behave. So one of the things that's really helpful about a newsletter is that you can get statistics on who's clicking and opening, and that can tell you sort of who's engaging with that. So they're telling you with their clicks whether they're engaging with that content, and they're also, in the way that Mary mentioned, telling you with the willingness to respond with a personal note whether they're engaging with that content as well. So I've heard from some composers that, Mary, I'm going to mirror your point exactly. If you put on an email campaign, do it sparingly. You could put people on it who might be presenters that you've worked with before, or past commissioners, or people who are important to you on a professional level, who might just like to see a very infrequent touch base on the highlights of what you're working on. And sometimes that's enough to just bring you back into the frame of focus to get that phone call for that next opportunity. So that's something to note. But on the con side, this is sort of, I'm going to share my screen here for just a second. This is what we were sort of alluding to. Probably your email looks like this, as mine does. If you have Gmail, you've got your primary, you've got your social, and then you've got your promotions folder, which I literally never look at. Here's a screenshot of what it looks like, right? So it's helpful to note that it's not the most personal way to be in touch. So what Lainie was saying earlier is this idea of writing targeted emails to people. Of course, it's going to see a higher response rate. And I want to talk a little bit about how you might be thinking about those emails, because what you want to do ultimately at the end of the day, if what you're looking to do is to drive a collaboration or a relationship, you really want to get that person into a conversation, right? Like, it's not about just getting into the email. So I want to share a couple of really concise examples of what these can look like, what sales emails can look like when received. And I want you to think in your own mind, what does it feel like to you when you see an email like this, so that you can get a sense for what the receiver may be dealing with when they open your email. This is a straight up sales email that I got once. All right. Recipe for online course success. Da, 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 da. It's a very sales focused, funnely email. How interested are we in this? Like, probably not, right? We know we're being sold to at this point in time. I used to do a lot of sales work in my previous role with Fifth House. And so I would send emails that looked a little bit more like this. And what I want to share is that this is an email that went to a contact who I had known before, who had worked with the group before. And so, it starts with something that's rather personal. I am talking a little bit about some of the things that I know about this person. I know that this is a person who really enjoys being an expert in things and is super on top of stuff. So I'm like, yeah, I know you probably have the world figured out much more than we do. And I also know about this person that they're very much a get in and get out of conversations sort of person. So I'm including a lot of numbers in here. Hey, we just prepared for Fresh Ink, this many performances, this many events, like here are some links to learn more. So it's not a very wordy email, but at the end, there's one thing that I just want to share with you. I put a link to a scheduling link in there. That is something that has changed my life in terms of being able to actually get meetings with people. If you can schedule a time in that way, it's a lot. The hit rate on being able to get a call when you don't have to back and forth figure out a time has been much higher. And of course, I'm saying hello to their significant other as well. So it feels very personal. So this is what an email looks like if it's a sales email of someone who might be a little bit warmer. And then after this email resulted in a conversation and a booking, a year later, I send an email that looks like this. So the thing that I'm trying to communicate here is that this email says more like, hey, I was so glad Christine is one of her students, that, she had sent a note after her recital and all of this, and then another link to schedule a time to talk. And it doesn't say that I'm selling anything at this point in time, but that email also resulted in a booking. So when we're talking about the idea of relationship building, like knowing what's going on in a person's life, those emails, those correspondences tend to look really different as you move down that relationship trajectory, if that makes any sense. I'm curious, like Lainie and Mary, have you had similar experiences along those lines?
I was just thinking, even when I'm sending out personal emails, which I do so rarely, because it's funny, I don't think I promote my work very well, but and this could be peculiar to my character, I feel so much more comfortable when I kind of am funny and I put in big, bold capital letters, okay, I'm shamelessly self-promoting this event, everybody, get ready. And then I'm like, hey, Mary, I've got this concert and I was nervous, now I'm so pumped. But when I start going, I'm self-aware that what you're about to read is just entirely about me and I'm promoting it, I feel comfier. And I think, I was just thinking, gosh, the emails that I like getting have any hint of the person's actual personality and knowledge of my personality. Again, this is so hard if you're trying to reach lots of big audience, but especially if you're like me and you have a fairly modest group of folks you're targeting, just having my character in there makes me feel good when I'm sending out emails. And if I'm getting a notice from somebody, just having a sense of their character, not what they think their tone should be, if that makes sense. Does that strike you both? Is that something?
Totally, yes. So you're talking about a marriage between what's my personality and a willingness to be vulnerable at the top of that email and say, hey, I feel weird about this, but here we are. Or also to label what you're about to do, which is disarming. So if you're about to give someone bad news, to say, I'm really about to ruin your day, and then go for it. You're like, there's something about that is disarming. And then also being able to really think about how targeted that ask is to, and the style is to what you know the person's going to see, which in that example that I showed, I know that this is a very, very point-to-point targeted person, which is why I start with data and not story. You know what I mean?
I want to throw out a little bit of a wild card as we've been talking about cultivating these long-term relationships before we make an ask of any kind of weight. And I also want to make an argument for the cold email that does have an ask in that first point of contact, minus the 5 points of contact, like straight to that first initial one. Because I think there will be people that we're interested in collaborating with who we've never met in person and might never have the opportunity to meet in person. And it would be a little strange. And a specific case was there's a filmmaker that I really wanted to work with. And I think it would have been really strange if I reached out to this filmmaker and said, hey, how you doing? Here's some personal stuff about me. Just want to know what's going on in your life before actually sharing, like, because my dream is to work with you at some point. So I would also make a case for, if you're going to do a cold email about a project that you want to work on with somebody else, to just be so genuine and really understand the work of the other person, and write that email that says, I am introducing myself. This is the kind of stuff that I do. I've been such a fan, like, be the fan. I don't care. I have no ego when it comes to being the fan. I will say I am a huge fan of your work. It has influenced me in X, Y, and Z. It would be a dream to collaborate with you at some time. If you would ever want to talk, like Zoom, coffee, whatever, I would love to just talk with you. And it sometimes works. Like, it sometimes really, really works. And in this case, it felt super scary. This person was completely out of my league, but now we're continuing to collaborate on other projects. So I also want to make a case for that, like, reach hello that maybe some of us are a little nervous to do, because it can also work really beautifully. And I think it goes to, like Sugar, you mentioned something about, like, kind of awkward social interactions when you're meeting someone and you're feeling like they're kind of conning you into something. People smell that, but people also smell if you're very genuine and sincere in the reason why you want to be in touch. So that's all. So I guess it could be a sprint or a marathon. I don't know.
No, I completely agree. And I want to clarify, the 5 points of contact for me thing, just to be clear, isn't like you need to sit down and have 5 meaningful, physical space room conversations. For me, it can even be like, oh, on Instagram, you like a picture that they posted of their lunch. I mean, just 5 times. And if it's not only for showing the person, that you care about their work, it's for you really getting to know the person that you're writing. Like, what if you have a picture of who this person is and what they do? I think making yourself go through the practice of, like, okay, but I'm going to really make sure the collaboration or the assistance or whatever is really what I have in mind. But that said, Mary, I totally agree. And in fact, it hasn't really been for me, that I, kind of a lot of the collaborations that I've had in my life, I've been super lucky, and they've come sort of bubbled up very organically, and it hasn't been a big ask. But the 2 times that I'm thinking of where I literally walked up to someone I barely knew and went, hello, I'm Lainie. I love your playing so much. I think you're so amazing. Here's why. I heard you do this and this and this, and I love this and this, and I've loved your instrument forever, blah, blah, blah. And I don't even say, I say, if you ever want a piece from me, I'm there yesterday. Let's figure out something. And it worked both times.
Yeah.
So I agree with you, Mary, 100%.
I want to underline something that both of you said, which is a lot of people come in and say, oh, I'm such a fan of your work. That's great, but only if followed up by, for the following specific reasons, which each of you said. That way it's really genuine admiration. You can really point to the things about that person's work that you get connect with. I once, early career, made that mistake with a composer who I really did love their work, but I said that, and the composer said to me, exactly which ones and in what way
Oh,
and for what reason.
that. That's mean.
Well, that is mean, but the way, like if someone said that to me, the way I'd hear it, no, this is a bad example because now I'm going to sound like bragging. I feel like if you go up to somebody else and say, I really like your work, I would worry that this somebody else would hear that as, I really like your status, your level of recognition, and what you can offer me. Like that is what I would hear versus, I see you for who you are and appreciate your work in the context of how it inspires my life and world and makes it better. And thanks.
So you might say that the sentence, I really love your work might be, I really love your status and I would like to ride your coattails, if not followed by something else.
Yeah. Icky.
That's gross. I totally hear you. And Lainie, I want to point to one other thing you said, which is about social media. Like you never know what's going to happen. Definitely, as we look at that social media side of things, people think about engaging online as being different from how you engage in person. But it's helpful to think about it as exactly the same as you would engage in person. You want to listen. You want to form relationships. You want to support other people. Like the best way to shine a light on yourself is to shine a light on someone else, like repost, like whatever it is.
Yes.
Way before. And then, the other thing, I always like to tell this story when we talk about what can happen in these circumstances. So a friend of mine had just moved from one university post to another and was in a leadership position. And when moving cities, put a post on Facebook that said, hey, does anybody have any vegan slow cooker recipes? And so I responded with my favorite, like chickpea kale curry situation. And I got a private message afterwards saying, hey, has Fifth House ever been to this school for a residency before? And it turned into an 18-month contract. So it's just helpful to note that these things totally occur. And for us to realize that people hire people who are not just good relationship with them, but who they legit remember. And one of the ways that you can be remembered is just by being active and friendly in those spaces that you have.
Mm-hmm. And again, that's hopefully if you want to be working in this community, collaborating with this community, hopefully you do enjoy just consuming whatever this community is. And I say this, the many communities you might want to be part of or be making in, you want to be just eating up whatever they got to serve, whether it's chickpea recipes or music or art. There's a quote, and I should have looked it up before we talked, and I didn't. But Pauline Oliveros had some kind of quote, never work on your career, help your community and the career will come.
Oh, wow.
Oh my God, that's just how I want to live my life, which means I should know that quote like word for word, but I don't. But I heard that when I was in my early 20s. I just went, oh, yeah, that's great. I love all the stuff my community's doing. I'm not going to worry, because then it's like, oh, I win. If my community wins, I've won. And if I have, projects I'm proud of, that's great. But if other people I love have projects they're proud of, that's also great, because I'm helping my community that I care about grow. So it's kind of both inspiring and sort of a load off that like, oh, I care about lots of music that I love happening just as much as my own music happening.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, everything that we do is of service to other people, whether we realize it or not in many ways. And a lot of what we will do that will be the most valuable is at the intersection of our greatest passion and how we are most helpful to others. So that process of building relationships is often how you find out where that intersection is. So we've talked about engaging online. We are now often spending time with one another on the phone or over Zoom. And so I'm curious if the two of you have any tips about how to give good phone or how to be the best you can be on a Zoom screen now that so much happens there these days, especially during the pandemic.
Mary?
I'm the introvert and I'm going to start answering this question because I'm really confessing, like things that make me sweat are like calling people on the phone, especially cold calls or for professional purposes. I still get just as nervous as I was when I was like 18 doing this. But it's important. And it really takes a lot of work and effort sometimes to get yourself there. But I think I know we're tired of Zoom, but I've had a lot of really wonderful conversations from Zoom conversations that I don't think would have happened necessarily in a coffee shop with a lot of noise and activity and the ritual of like, okay, we both meet at the coffee shop and now we have to kind of fumble over who pays the bill and there's going to be an expiration time because we can't sit at the table for that long. And I've felt that what's been really great about Zoom is once the meeting starts, you can actually just start talking in a low pressure, comfortable environment kind of way. But I think it really just goes to a lot of things that we've already touched on, is that if you're having any kind of professional meeting over Zoom or phone, some of them are going to be quick in and out meetings, but also, again, we're just talking to people. So I like talking about hey, how are you doing? How was your day? Have you, what was the highlight of your day so far, to just kind of like break the ice a little bit before getting into business. I don't know, some people might feel a little differently. Maybe that's too fluffy and you just want to dive into it.
There's something really special about mirroring. And this is something that I think is really important when you're in a phone or Zoom situation, that one of the best ways to find out what kind of person you're talking to, if you don't know them and you've made that cold email and they've agreed to that Zoom call with you, is you just ask, how's your day going? You know what I mean? How are you today? And that person is going to either respond with, fine. So if you see that, you need to get in and get out with your pitch really quickly. Or they might say, oh my God, like today, da, 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 da. And so then you know that you can have that more like emotional or touch-based sort of conversation. People are going to tell you. So if you mirror what their behavior is, a lot of times you're going to feel more bonded. I just had a meeting with a funder the other day where the person says, okay, so I sit on 8 calls like this every day. Tell me the issue you're solving, how you're going to intervene, and what the evaluation is. And I go, great, point. And that was a very successful conversation. So it's about really understanding who you're talking to. And I love what you're saying about how we have that opportunity at the starts of these. I would also say, for those who identify with what Mary just said, and I want to thank you so much for saying the idea of being introverted.
Understatement.
It's really, really, really important to note that you can be hugely successful while being an introvert at forming relationships. And the superpower you have is that you listen. And so therefore, when you speak, it's the right thing, So
the superpower as musicians is that we listen. I think we're good at talking. I hope we're good at talking at people, that we're not just making sound all the time, that we're good at listening to others.
Yeah, that is for 100%. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I want to kind of get in now to that idea of the in-person, which is something that New Music Gathering has done such a beautiful job of. So first of all, I would love to hear a little bit more about what New Music Gathering is and what you were thinking about as you started it.
It is funny. I feel like there were a lot of conversations about it's wonderful to be together in a room, and a lot of beautiful, meaningful conversations and friendships and relationships are happening online. But I think some of the initial inspiration was, oh, wouldn't it be great if folks who are all interested in fragile music, fragile experimental music, could be in rooms together, talking about it, making it, laughing about it. So that was really the initial idea. There were a lot of conversations about, we want to keep the wonderful part of networking and shy away from the sense of commodification of ourselves and what we do, that I think just in a capitalist market that we exist within, or at least at the periphery of. We wanted to make a space that maybe could help you navigate that, but internally didn't feel like that. Internally didn't feel like you had to be your toughest self, your most marketable self. That it could be a place where you felt joyful in being a vulnerable self and had the support and joy and fun of like-minded, or at least supportive community. So that's really what we wanted to do. And it was pretty vague in the beginning. The first call that first year was just an email blast. Hey, is there anything you'd want to do with something like this? There was no form. There was no application. Just, ooh, do you have any ideas? Would you like to do them? And I believe we said, please, yes, to almost everyone that we could. There were some proposals of folks who wanted very large scale, very expensive things that we just didn't have the resources to produce. But everything else, we found a way to make it happen. And I hope for people it did feel what it felt to me. It felt magical. I'd never really, since I first was exposed to Bang on a Can, I was around lots and lots of people who I felt all of a sudden really close to. I hope New Music Gathering is a place where people can all of a sudden feel both a physical proximity and just an emotional proximity to other people who care about making interesting, beautiful sounds.
Well, for everyone that I've known who has been there, that the word magical definitely fits. And I know that within the context of everything that is New Music Gathering, there has been a sort of signature around that speed dating process, or it now has a new name, right? Besides speed dating.
We're thinking of fast friends. Fast
Love
friends.
Love it. So tell us a little bit about how that works and how it sort of unpacks the things about networking that have been the grosser side that you wanted to get away from, and fostering the things that you want to keep.
Before I bat this over to Mary, because I want to hear Mary describe it, I'll just say this was, again, the earliest conversations, like with Matt and Danny and Mary and Yasha, who's now, like, I was like, I hate it's funny because I love having new friends, but I hate the the cocktail party-ish after the concert awkwardness. I'm like the most closety introvert in the world, but I get so hyper nervous in that situation. And I remember my big first thing that I said to Matt Marks was like, we need a structure to give awkward people a sense of purpose. I was like, if it's a big room of awkward people and we just say, go around and make friends, I would not go in that room. I would leave and cry. But if you give an awkward, laughable sense of purpose and structure, I think this thing might fly. Okay, I'm gonna give it to Mary. Well, maybe could I screen share my photos? Would this be an okay time? Okay, Mary, take it away.
Yeah.
I'm gonna.
Okay. Well, our Fast Friends event has taken a few different forms because we've been in person, but also the past couple of years have done either entirely online events or like a hybrid of in-person and online events. So we had to change the way that this actually was structured. But I think, well, the idea of Fast Friends was that initially it was a little binary where we wanted composers and performers to meet so that they could share their work in 3 minutes or less and hopefully create something after New Music Gathering. That's changed. We don't really care what kind of music making you do or what role you identify with. We just want you to meet somebody, either meet somebody new or talk to somebody that you know in a different kind of way. So we operated under a bit of chaos when it was a physical event like that, where it's just like hundreds of people in one room, and you'll see laptops and maybe even at that point iPods, because this is dated now, where you have 3 minutes to share your sounds, get to know somebody, and then a giant gong intrusively interrupts your conversation and you move to the next person. And something about the chaos of it makes it really fun. You like can't really get too serious in that context when you have hundreds of people talking at the same time, and you have to embrace that it's fun and hilarious and a little disastrous. But I think that also lowers your guard a little bit, so that something that could potentially be really awkward. Oh, I love, oh, Aiden, you're in this picture. That's so great. So that's one form of this. Another thing that we had started doing, especially in 2020 when we were entirely online because of the pandemic, and even this last year in St. Paul where we did a hybrid, was rather than having this large kind of cacophonous group, we broke people into small groups of like 2 or 3 people. And we gave them questions to help, like maybe you don't know what to talk about with somebody you've never met. So we offered like, just questions like, what is something that you've been wanting to do in your music making but haven't done yet? And then you just talk about that and you can see if you connect on that or not, or what are some sounds that you've been wanting to explore, or what are you listening to at the moment? And they sound like simple questions, but they can be good conversation starters with someone entirely new. I love these pictures. I love that you can see people smiling even behind their masks. This is really fun to be outside doing this. And what we found is a lot of people have done collaborations after doing this event. And more importantly, I think, or maybe more obviously, is that people are just connected after a new music gathering from this event. We're noticing a lot of people who just engage on social media a lot more because they met each other at a new music gathering, which is like the most flattering thing in the world as an organizer, to know that there are relationships that continue. So yeah, I hope that that helps. I also, while we were talking about this, wanted to pop in an article that someone we met at New Music Gathering, Garrett Hope, who had attended quite a few of our New Music Gatherings, wrote this wonderful article for New Music Box called An Introvert's Guide to the New Music Gathering and Other Networking Events. So it's not just specific to us, it can be used in your lives in any kind of social atmosphere. And I love that, to just have like a list, a bullet point of lists of things that you can do, like ways to engage with other people, but also to give yourself permission to not engage with people, to sit an event out, to be quiet in a corner. I know I like visit, this is gonna sound like TMI and isn't supposed to sound gross, but like I visit the restroom a lot because I just need quiet time. Like I just need to, after a lot of talking with people that I don't know, I just need a moment to breathe and collect myself so that I can go back in a room and talk to people and be, you know, my normal self. Yes, and you do dishes at parties. I'm one of those people. Don't help me with the dishes. I'm doing them for a reason. Yeah.
I know, it's like I need a break. I'm just going to scrub some things. Seriously, y'all go in there and talk.
Yes.
I love that you've got 3 introverts on here who fake it really well. So that is,
well,
yeah, but I mean,
I'm gonna put in just a word for embracing sometimes giving up. I think we said this to y'all when we chatted last time. A lot of times if there's a big group of people and I really want to talk to someone, but I just can't make myself enter a big noisy group of people I don't know, I'll go home and I'll find the contact for the person I want to talk to. I'll just write and be really honest and say, hi, I was gonna hang out after the concert, but I get really awkward after concerts and I ran home and went to bed. But this morning I'm still thinking about how excited I was about the way you played that piece. I've never heard a cello scream like a kitten before. Like I felt really good about the times I let myself not push, but then still express my gratitude or admiration for someone by just reaching out later. And I think people relate to that. I mean, just on this call, the 3 of us who are in music can really relate to, oh, I couldn't do what was maybe the socially convenient thing at the time, but I still care about connecting with you.
exactly. So you're finding your own style. And I also want to underline, Mary, I'm going to come to you next. It's just this idea that when you show up in a new city as a composer, this is like the #1 question I get from composers. How do I get people to know my work? How do I establish myself? Go to things. I mean, it's hard now in this moment. Like you have to show up in the chat window or like be active in the Q&A or whatever it is. Like we see you in the chat and that's one of the ways we know you're here and can like engage with you. Hi, NT. Hi, John Paul. Hi, Aiden. You know, hi, Stephen. It's nice to see you all. But like that part of your job is the after show. So if you're in a place where you just can't do it, Lainie, that's a really great alternative. Mary, let's go to you.
Oh, well, okay, so now I have all sorts of thoughts. I was also going to dovetail on what Lainie said by maybe also saying that every opportunity to network doesn't necessarily have to be an opportunity that you take. Like I would even say maybe you don't write the email when you go home. I'm someone where when I go to concerts, and maybe this is also from being a little isolated from the pandemic, that my own social anxiety is even more heightened than it's ever been before. But I am the person where everything in my body says, okay, and now you go home, the concert's done. There's a bunch of people, you even know some of those people, you even really like and love a lot of the people in this room, but I think I'm going to go home. And I think giving yourself permission to, and maybe don't always do that, but to sometimes do that without guilt. And then when you feel like the environment and the situation's right, or you've summoned the courage to go talk to people after a concert, then great, you did it, but it doesn't have to be like a 10 out of 10 kind of thing. That said, when you brought up the question of moving to a new city and how do you meet friends and how do you get your music heard, I can share my experience of how I felt like I really started making friends, which was I had lived in New York for grad school, but I was studying film, so I wasn't meeting all of these cool new music people at all. I left, I lived in LA for a little while and decided, no, I miss New York. And when I moved to New York, I had no friends because I wasn't in film anymore. And I wanted to be in new music and I didn't know how to meet anyone. And at the time, Le Poisson Rouge was really happening. So I just went 2 or 3 times a week to LPR and found that a lot of the same people were going to those concerts. So I would meet people after the concerts, just socializing, and those are the folks that ended up being my regular friends and ended up being the people that I continue to collaborate with. So that really helped. And then as far as getting music played, you know, sometimes you meet people and you meet other ensembles who want to play your music, but I think when you're starting out, that can be really hard. Sometimes you have to make your own stuff happen. So I know, Lainie, you've started your own organizations too. And I mean, we've started an organization together, but I started a group. I didn't have people playing my music. So I started an ensemble that would play my music and other people's music, and met great musicians that way, and great composers and music makers that way too. So sometimes you just, I don't know, have to make stuff happen for yourself.
I love it. I love it. And there's so much about what you're saying that, you know, that didn't just enrich your career, it enriched your life. Like, these are your friends. These are the people who you hang out with. And I can't underline that enough. And in our last few minutes here, I want to talk about why on earth we would do this in the first place. I mean, we're looking for long-term collaborations. We're looking for people that we can be friends with, that will enrich our lives and also be our source of support around the work that we do. So I wonder if you could share maybe a story or two about composers and artists who have connected to one another through New Music Gathering successfully and built work together. And what were some of the behaviors that you saw happen? I mean, there's a quote that I love, that people will never remember what you say, but they will remember how you made them feel. And I think it's lovely to think about how we show up as being one of the most important parts of this.
I mean, I don't know if this is exactly an answer to your question, but one of the giant success stories in my mind is Shia Lion. I don't know if folks on the webinar know this amazing force of light and good, but Shia Lion had just left her job as a product manager in the software world, and she happened to read about New Music Gathering. She was in San Francisco, I think, visiting family, and she came to New Music Gathering kind of on a whim, and she said she loved them. She had been an amateur musician, but she loved the music so much. She loved the sense of community so much. She founded her own organization, Live Music Project, and it's based in Seattle, but now it's national. It's now a nonprofit. There's a board. Thank you, Mary, for putting the link. It's astounding. And the entire organization that pulls, I mean, half the it's Meg Enan and Kevin Clark. It's folks that she met at New Music Gathering who became the directors of the organization along with her. And all of it is just getting folks information about how to go to concerts for free, in person, online, all over the world, all different, different kinds of music. And that feels amazing to me, because it's not only that it brought musicians together to make something new happen, but it's like it brought musicians together to make something new happen for other musicians. It's like, it was like a double success. And she was really, I think she wasn't just inspired by the music, but she was inspired by the people making the music. And I think a lot of the collaborations that happened, I think of, Michael Hall commissioned a bunch of people. I think Meg Enan has a bunch of new collaborators. Evan Tucker, MusoChat, a fabulous, I'm not on Twitter. I don't know how to describe it.
Oh, well, MusoChat, I think, is also Shia, and was that also Kevin and Megan Enan and
Kevin and
Eric?
Yeah, Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, MusoChat essentially is like hashtag MusoChat, and they would meet and maybe continue to meet once a week. Was it Saturdays? Some of you in the who are attending might even know better than I would meet Saturdays in the evening and would post this Sundays. Thank you. Oh, and it doesn't exist anymore. Well, maybe,
oh no.
Okay, space for something else to grow.
Yeah, that's right. Hashtag MusoChat
on Twitter under the MusoChat hashtag, and would pose a series of questions, and it would facilitate conversations with anyone on Twitter who was tuned in at that time. Thank you, Sugar, for letting us know. I mean, Sugar participated on this as well too, which is really wonderful. And that's like the paying it forward aspect of it, like Lainie, what you're saying, things that have come from meeting at New Music Gathering, which were intended to pay it forward to an even larger community beyond New Music Gathering, make us so incredibly happy. So happy. But also it's facilitated like commissions, like you were saying, and kind of smaller collaborations, which are also incredibly meaningful too.
Totally. That's such a great example.
I would say, yeah, just another example. Oh, I love Evan Tucker. I love Evan Tucker. He's a composer. He's in Maryland, and he didn't have people playing his music. He had piles and piles of gorgeous music, and he just didn't have communities playing his music. And I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe from his coming and sharing just his scores and talking about them at New Music Gathering, he has people playing his music. And it feels amazing. I think just up in Boston, Sarah Bob just programmed him for a new gallery concert series. I forget there was someone else. We should really keep an extremely extensive spreadsheet of just all the love and joy that's placed. But it is kind of fun that it's decentralized, that it's really up to everyone else after we give them a little bit of extra opportunity.
Love it. So it sounds like we've got a couple of questions before we close off today. So Zachary, welcome to the room. Nice to see you. The floor is yours.
You. Well, actually, so building on some of the things that you've asked and actually kind of postulated about, kind of generating some new music gatherings, things like that. I was curious what you thought about, because obviously the idea of weekly gatherings, there's something that I started whenever I was in my master's at the University of Oklahoma, literally just composer's lunch. And we would just get together on Fridays, get pizza, and it ended up evolving to the point where I've been gone from that university for like 2-3 years and it's still going. But someone actually brought up a cool idea for it, and it was something called bring your performer to lunch day. So basically, if I'm working with a performer on something, bring them so that, they can get introduced. You can introduce them to people they might like. I was curious if you thought that that is something that is kind of in line with that, or if that's something that kind of almost feels like a jet too far. For me, I liked the idea and we did it a few times, but to my knowledge, it hasn't happened in the past couple of years since I left.
I think pizza and bringing new friends is always going to be a goal.
Yeah, are you asking us if we like pizza and meeting new composers and performers? The answer is yes. That is the answer. That's wonderful. That's great.
That's awesome. I love it, Zachary. And I love that idea of like, bring a performer with you, because that person is already a mark for new music, which is totally great. Yeah, thank you so much.
Which sometimes is a hot commodity.
That's awesome.
100%, 100%. Well, thank you for sharing that experience with us, and congrats on creating something that lives beyond your time in the space. It's nice to see you.
Always fun to see. And thank you.
Yes, thank you. And it sounds like we have John Paul also with the question. Cutest picture ever.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for letting me chime in. Good to see you, Mary, and everyone else. I am my question's quick. So I'm the poster child for this conversation around not keeping relationships up. And now that I've completed like a huge musical that I'm super proud of, I'm looking to share. And my question is, how authentic is it to share or in a pseudo cold email, share a video of me performing the whole thing at a reading that I did with local friends, and me being my lovable self, like I can't do it well, but I'm up there being silly. And how do you feel about that?
Can I just to clarify? So you're asking, you've got a video of you performing your own musical, and you're just curious what?
Yeah, because I'm not a singer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I have thoughts, but I'm also if you knew me personally, I'm just so willing to be so goofy and what some people might label unprofessional that I would share it if you think, if there's something in it that you're proud to share, if there's something that you feel good about people seeing it and hearing it and associating that music with you, I say share it. If you don't feel like you look at that video and you think, oh, this is a good representation of me. You know what I mean? Like you feel like, oh, I just haven't had the luck, the resources to have people performing this musical, and this is all I have. I guess I have to share it. Ugh. I probably wouldn't if it was me. But if you don't feel that way, if you like it, I'm so tickled. I would definitely share it. Yeah, exactly.
So I have a question, just so I make sure that I understand. So you wrote this musical and you're singing, like you're doing the mock-up of the parts, is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, acting as the storyteller.
Yeah, so I have been in your shoes. I write a lot of material for voice and am not a singer, but I put myself in my mock-ups I know, Lainie, you're good at singing.
You're such a good singer. Everyone Mary's amazing as a singer.
All right, karaoke queen. But my insecurity is I feel like nothing sounds the way that I hear it in my head, and I'm not a trained singer, so I have all of my imposter syndrome around it. But something that I have really been enjoying doing is in the past couple of years saying, screw it, I don't care, this is my process and people are going to have to hear it. So I've been more actively creating situations in which people have to hear me sing, not because I want to make people feel uncomfortable, but because it kind of removes the nervousness away from me. So my suggestion is, especially if you're nervous to share it, I would share it, because that will help you later on. I think that I'm a big fan of, in our art making, things that really freak you out, just do it anyway. You have a thought. What's your thought?
I do. It's that I'm so proud of it. It's the cold emailing pseudo aspect, because I struggle from Arvo-Pärt syndrome right now. Like I've moved to Hawaii, married my husband, and I've just sort of like been in a canoe all the last 10 years, but working on this musical. And now
I would love to get that email. If you sent that email to, like, let's say, you know, Lainie is the composer you wanted to reach out to. Hey, Lainie, you don't know me. I married my husband and moved to Hawaii, and I was in a canoe for 10 years. And I've got this weird mock-up that tickles me, and I'm so proud of it. And I just want to share it with you, and I want to get your thoughts, because I'm trying to get, where do you think this lives? Are there performers you'd recommend? But like if you want to share it and you're saying you're proud of it and it tickles you, that's absolutely.
In real, I know the time and everything, but maybe what I would do is I would create an excerpt of the musical, and I would send the excerpt and say, if it feels okay to you to take a look at this, let me know and I'll send you a link to the full musical, because time is really tricky. So if you could put your best work forward in like 30 seconds to 2 minutes, then say you're golden.
Yep, I would underline what Mary just said. Know your mark, keep it concise, and also name it. If you feel like it's like, hey, this is me just futzing over you, name it, you know, so people know what they're seeing. Really great. Well, thank you so much, John Paul. It's nice to see you. And we have one last question before we wrap up from Sugar.
Sugar!
Nice to see you, Sugar.
Did I do this wrong? Oh my God.
There you are. Hi.
Hey, oh my God, there's all this baby stuff. It's so embarrassing. See, I'm still a musician.
It's beautiful.
But I just have a quick question. It might be beyond the scope of this, so if it is, like, don't worry about it. Oh no, sorry. The question is, how would you apply this, like, this creative connection building to something like a venue or presenter? Because, like, that's where I struggle more, you know? So just, like, any thoughts on that? Because it's like, that, I don't know, it's kind of scary.
Yes, I can definitely speak to that. So the emails that you saw went to a presenter. So that's the first thing I'll say, hello. And so the other thing that I'll say here is that presenters are people just like everyone else, but they're also very busy people, and they get a lot of correspondence. So they get a lot of emails, they got a lot of phone calls. Most of the phone calls are actually planned at this point. We actually do a lot less business over the phone now than we used to as a sector. Usually if you're calling someone, it's because you have a time set aside to do so that's specialized. But one of the things that I would definitely recommend is make sure that you have sharpened the saw as far as you can sharpen it before even making that initial outreach. And what I mean by that is making sure you really have your ducks in the row around the type of pitch you want to make, the projects you're looking to pitch, that the documentation around the stuff you're looking to pitch is really targeted and focused on your website. And also that you know everything that you can know about what that presenter is succeeding at right now, and also how you as an artist can help forward thinking, solve a problem from them in the future. So if you know that their sweet spot is right here, but they've really been delving into this, and that happens to be the area of work that you're in, you come in as a solutions person as opposed to just another artist. So that's one thing that I would say. And also just being really conscious of the fact that they're going to get a million pitches every day. So this relationship building piece is really similar to if you're looking to get a commission from an artist or from an orchestra or whatever it is. A cold call will always be a little bit less of a hit rate or a cold email than a relationship that someone can make for you. So to the extent that you can create an introduction from somebody that you know, that's a positive thing. I would also strongly recommend starting any conversation with, hey, I just saw that you had so-and-so on your series. How did that program go? And you can kind of get a sense for how they talk about it. Because again, with that mirroring side, they will typically share stats with you if they're a stats driven person, in which case you want to say, great, we just had a similar show within your state. We were in a hall that had 500 people, had X number of ticket sales in terms of percentage, and this was the ticket cost. You're going to know that that's their driver, versus if they tell you stories about the program, you'll know that they want to hear a story in return. So a lot of the same rules apply, but just in a really, really focused way, if that makes sense. And happy to chat about that with you offline as well. Hope that helps a bit. And first of all, I want to say a huge thanks. Thank you, Sugar, for joining us. It's nice to see you. Thanks to Mary and to Lainie for sharing your wisdom and enthusiasm with us. And also, I want to welcome Aiden back to the screen for our wrap up. I know we've been talking about ways to connect to one another and community and all of that. So we want to kind of point you towards one opportunity to do so.
Right. So thank you so much to our panelists and to Melissa for having this awesome conversation. I know we've all learned a lot, or at least I have. But yeah, we'd love for you to join us. We're on Discord. I put the link in the chat box, and we'll be on there for the next 15 minutes or so. If you have other questions or anything else you'd like to talk about, Melissa and I will be hanging out there. So if you'd like to join us, we'll be back February 23rd at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our next webinar, which is the Gainfully Employed Composer. And that will be with Melissa again and composer Dan Visconti. So we will be sending out an email with all of the resources that we talked about today, in addition to a few others. So thank you so much for joining us. Feel free to register on our website for the next one, and we'll be in touch on Discord if you'd like to join us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Aiden. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.